a mistake, and it doesn't make them a horrible person. Whoa.
Okay. Wow. Okay, couple of things. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapist-y things on this channel. And today we are talking about Colleen Ballinger and her non-apology ukulele song. I originally was not going to address this because we haven't made content like this in a hot minute, but I feel like I would be remiss to not address this because A, it's egregiously fucking bad, but B, there are actually, I think, useful tips or actionable advice in here about how to tell when you're being manipulated or if someone's trying to manipulate you, because we're gonna get into it. Before we do that though, a general disclaimer on this video especially, and on the channel generally, all of this is intended to be broad strokes, education and learning. This is not therapy, can't be therapy, but there are always links in my description for you to go find your own therapist if you want to. So that said, let's just get into it. Also, before we get started, just full disclosure, we're probably going to either speed this up and or pitch up the audio on this because it's a song and I don't know to what degree she's going to try to copyright this or take my video down. So sorry if it's a little weird, but it is what it is. Okay, let's watch this video. Okay, yeah, we didn't even make it to the part where she talks yet. I want to address this. I know that this seems like a nitpicky thing, but hear me out. I want to address this because I know that the field of body language analysis is particularly contentious. People have a lot of strong opinions about it. And for what it's worth, there's not a lot of robust research to support the efficacy of this, especially in terms of discerning people's secret intentions and discovering the inner workings of their mind based on how often they're blinking. All that kind of stuff is not really well supported in research. However, as a therapist and clinicians generally, we do receive training about how to assess body language, mostly from the lens of how to tell if your client is uncomfortable and assess whether they're feeling safe and they trust you and that kind of a thing. But I want to talk about this because this staring directly at camera thing that she does with the sort of look at this face, look at this face that she's making. It just reads like it's oozing in contempt and resentment for her perceived or proverbial audience, which is not a good sign, especially when we talk about the purpose of an apology to be repairing and empathy and compassion, right? This is not giving any of that. I also just want to address the fact that there are several points in this video where she does this very acty thing of pretending that the camera's not there or pretending that she's going to turn the camera off when she doesn't, and it just reads as at best, it's phony and disingenuous, and at worst, it's an active attempt to manipulate people by putting on this facade and quite literally acting. So just again, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody, but this doesn't have a place in a good apology.
Hey, it's been a while since you saw my face. I haven't been doing so great, so I took a little break. So a lot of people are saying some things about me that aren't quite true. Doesn't matter if it's true though, just as long as it's entertaining to you.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Real quick, let's address that. She uses this language over and over again, saying that as long as this is entertaining, or I hope that you're having fun, etc., etc. Two things. As a trauma survivor and as a person who has done a fair amount of work helping folks process trauma, come to grips with their own victimization, it's never fucking fun rehashing the details of your trauma or having to share that with people, and God forbid, having people debate whether your trauma is real or valid. That's never fucking fun. So her making this assertion that people are doing this for clout or because they think it's funny is just gross. And again, at best, this is disingenuous, and at worst, this is an active attempt to invalidate the people who have come forward to bravely share their stories about some really horrific things that have happened to them. On top of that, another thing that I wanted to address, the way that she speaks about this has a very similar energy, in my opinion, to the way that folks will typically describe talking to a parent or primary caregiver about how they were traumatized in childhood. This reads very much as the oh, well, I'm sorry, I'm the worst parent ever. I'm just the worst. You've ruined our relationship by bringing this up, and I hope that you're happy. I hope that you're pleased with yourself. This has that same energy, and I just want to highlight this because to me, this seems like an attempt to create or provoke shame or guilt or embarrassment on behalf of the folks who are asking for Colleen to take accountability for her problematic behavior, which is fucked up. and is manipulative if that's true. So if you notice, especially if this is happening in a pattern in your relationships, fucking red flag. This is not a good sign. Healthy relationships don't include shaming someone who's asking you to take accountability. Before we move on, real quick caveat, I do want to address the fact that this is somewhat normal for us to feel this defensiveness, right? Or like self-righteous indignation when someone holds us accountable for stuff, especially if it's a sore spot or we're like new to doing work on ourselves and like all that kind of stuff, right? That's very human. It's okay. It's normal for us to, especially again, if it's a sore spot, for us to have this sort of knee-jerk reaction of like, ugh, like you've wounded me by asking me to take accountability for how I've hurt you. But the difference is in the way that we respond to that immediate reaction, whether we allow that to sit in the driver's seat and whether we allow that to sit in the driver's seat and dictate our behavior over and over and over and over again. There's a very, very big difference between just being a person who's emotionally dysregulated and maybe puts our ass in the street a little bit or like doesn't behave like our best version of ourselves, and making this conscious and repeated effort to do this in relationships over and over and over again for the purpose of maintaining power or for the purpose of asserting your reality, like steamrolling your reality over other people's. That's fucked up. That is abusive if someone's doing that to you. And so if you notice that happening, at the very least, validate it for yourself. But generally, I want to encourage you to talk to your safe people about that and seek some resources for safety, because that's not okay.
You guys having fun? All aboard the toxic gossip train.
Also, just on an unrelated note, I really did not have on my bingo card for 2023 that there was going to be a YouTuber apology that included someone yelling the words all aboard while playing ukulele. And I want off of this timeline. Like, I don't know what this is, but I don't like it.
You're chugging down the tracks of misinformation, the toxic gossip train. You got a one-way ticket to manipulation station. Toxic gossip train. Tie me to the tracks and harass me for my past. Cause rumors look like facts. If you don't mind the gaps, I won't survive in the crash.
Okay.
But hey, at least you're having fun.
Yeah, you see, like the combination of the facial expressions, this like intentional pausing, all of that combined with the particular language that she's using here is of note to me. I wanted to point this out because she does this repeatedly throughout this non-apology, using language like being tied to the tracks or not surviving a crash, that this person is going to die or that her reputation's deceased. Like all of this like very heavy-handed language that's intended to provoke this emotional reaction where we as the audience view Colleen as a victim for being held accountable. This is like one of the most predictable moves out of the manipulator playbook. I think a lot of folks are becoming more and more aware of this, but I wanted to draw your attention to it anyways because again, this has no place in a good apology, but B, in my opinion, this is becoming a thing that is more and more common in like influencer apology videos, is this attitude that like I'm being victimized by being held accountable for my shitty behavior, which is again problematic and manipulative. It's bad faith at best and like actively manipulative and abusive at worst, but also important for us to talk about the actual real life consequences of this, because I don't doubt that Colleen has probably experienced a fair amount of emotional upset because of this, right? However, the real world consequences of this are not what Colleen is alleging. She's not going to die. Her reputation is not like ruined beyond belief. There are still millions of people that are subscribed to her YouTube channel, and the reality is that Colleen has made life-changing amounts of money by being an influencer, by being platformed in this way. And so yes, this has been probably traumatizing and difficult for her, and also the real life consequences of this are not equivalent to what the victims of abuse have experienced. When we talk about like life-changing impact, being abused and being a victim of grooming, being a victim of someone who's abused their power differential, equating those two things is again disingenuous. It's really, really fucking hurtful. And in my opinion, it feels like she's doing this to again like provoke this sense of pity or like sympathy for Colleen, when that's just like wholly inappropriate.
Many years ago, I used to message my fans, but not in a creepy way like a lot of you are trying to suggest. It was more of a loser kind of way, where I was just trying to be besties with everybody. It's kind of like when you go to like a family gathering, you know, and there's a weird aunt there who keeps coming up to you and going like, "Hey girl, what's the tea?" And you're like, "Ugh." That was me, but in group chats with my fans. It was weird.
Okay, so I want to address this before we move on. I'm going to fast forward past some of this because I don't really have it in me to listen to Colleen wax poetic about how she's a victim. However, the distinction that I want to make here is about the actual definition of grooming. I've seen a lot of folks with genuine confusion about what grooming actually is. So to clarify from a clinical perspective, grooming is when an adult abuses or utilizes that power imbalance and their position of influence and authority to manipulate a child or a younger person into doing something for them that's advantageous to the adult. It can include CSA and other similar types of abuses, but it doesn't have to. So I think it's just important that we note that, because especially in the way that media and popular culture represents stuff like this happens with human trafficking a lot, where there's this expectation that because it doesn't look the way that it does in this big blockbuster movie or TV show or whatever, that therefore it must not be real. And this is super fucking hurtful to people who have survived real and genuine grooming and human trafficking and all that kind of stuff. But also the insinuation that it has to have reached the worst stages of a particular act in order for it to be valid is just not true. This is a thing that we accept pretty universally about lots of other types of trauma. So I want to encourage people to integrate that into your understanding and definition of grooming also. Moving on.
In all seriousness, I do think it's really important to hold people accountable for their
Oh
mistakes.
boy, here we go.
We should hope that everyone can learn from their mistakes and grow and change their behavior and be a better person. And this is something that I've always tried to do when I make mistakes, and it's something that I will continue to try to do. What? Oh, you don't care? Oh, okay. I thought you wanted.
This is what I'm fucking talking about. I included this clip specifically because it just pushes my fucking buttons that Colleen is making a joke out of something that is genuinely traumatizing and life-changing. And for this to have happened to minors, and for her to be making a joke about it and intentionally minimizing the impact of this, at best, this is not truthful, right? But to me, this does very much read as the attempt to invalidate and delegitimize these accusations that, from my understanding, by the way, are very credible and serious allegations, to avoid having to take accountability, which is fucked up. I also want to talk about this really quickly because when we talk about successful conflict resolution in relationships, it's common for us to have a hard time, especially initially, understanding why something that we did is hurtful to someone else, right? That's the crux of fucking conflict in relationships. Usually we don't mean to hurt someone. We do it on accident. But the thing that's important to remember when we talk about continuing to have a healthy bond with someone is that it doesn't matter if it doesn't initially make sense to you or not. Your choice in that moment is to validate that this person is bringing this hurt to you in good faith, and because they want to continue having a healthy and safe relationship with you. It may not make sense to you at first, but part of the work in being a safe and healthy person in relationship is being willing to say, okay, this doesn't make sense to me right now. And so maybe I can ask kindly, respectfully, for some extra context. Maybe I can make a conscious effort to immerse myself in your perspective. We can have a fuller conversation about this so that I can at least fucking try to empathize, to validate, and to understand where this person is coming from. When we are in relationship with people or when we love people, we should be willing to take them at face value, first of all, that when they tell us that they've been hurt, that they're being truthful, and second of all, that we care enough to make the effort to let go of our own narrative and our own version of reality, which we're allowed to have, but we're willing to let go of that enough to make room for someone else's reality to also be true. This is none of that. All of the behavior that she's demonstrating here is the opposite of that. And so if anyone in your life is behaving at all like this, please fucking take note of that. And again, talk to your safe people about it, create some safety for yourself, because this is not okay. Again, it's perfectly fine for people to not understand or for us to initially have a hard time getting it, right? But being a healthy person, being a safe person, being a kind person in relationship means that, again, we're at the very least willing to fucking try to get it so that we can continue to have safe and healthy and happy relationships. Also, for real, this song just being the same 6 words over and over again makes it really difficult to tell where we are in this fucking apology.
Sometimes people make a mistake and it doesn't make them a horrible person. Whoa.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Wow. Okay, couple of things. First and foremost, we're done with that. I've had it. But second of all, there are two things that she says. I can't find it because the whole apology sounds the same, and so trying to scrub through it is actually kind of difficult. So I am confident that you're familiar with it in some capacity. There is a moment in which Colleen says, my intentions were good, or I never had any bad intentions, but I do feel like shit right now. That in context with this whole last verse where she talks about how making mistakes doesn't make you a bad person, I want to address this because this is a common point of contention when we talk about apologies. This is probably the comment that I've received most often when we used to make YouTuber apology videos is that, like, I don't understand why I can't include an explanation about my intent when I'm apologizing. Or folks communicating, it is actually helpful to me to hear intent when someone has hurt me. So I want to address this. First of all, it's very, very important that we make the distinction between intention and impact. It does not matter what your intent was if the actual core impact or the resulting impact is still hurtful. It is, I think, sometimes helpful, especially in your relationship, dependent on like your particular situation, the relationship there, your culture, the nuance, the particular hurt that's taking place, all of those things. It can be helpful to include an explanation of intent, right? I want to encourage people to be careful with this because I think there are ways that it can come across as helpful, as like a repair attempt, and there are ways that it can come off as very defensive. So for what it's worth, if you want to include an explanation about your intent, or that's like situationally appropriate for y'all, doing it in a way where we're saying like, hey, I want to explain a little bit about why I did the thing that I did in case it helps you to understand more about me or in case it helps clarify some stuff. My intention was this, but now after hearing you, I get it. Like I understand why this came off as hurtful and I like understand that I did actually hurt you, right? I think honoring at the same time that like, yes, this was my intent and of course it wasn't bad, because again, in healthy, happy relationships, it's not usually our intent to hurt someone, and while we can do that and that is very human, I would argue that it's not the most common behavior, but we can honor that our intent was good and also that the impact is still bad. This is an important distinction to make, and I just want to encourage people to remember this, because when someone uses this sort of throwaway excuse of like, well, I didn't have bad intentions and so therefore you can't be mad at me. First of all, that doesn't fucking help our relationship at all. That doesn't make anybody feel better. Some of the advice that I give clients a lot is that it doesn't matter whether your feelings are like rational or whether you're like allowed to feel the way that you do, because the reality is that you do, right? Emotions are a thing that we have to work through and then we have to process and feel. They're not a thing that we can just say, oh, that's silly, I shouldn't feel that way, and I just turn it off. Like, it doesn't work that way. That's not how feelings work. And so in relationships where hurt has happened, it doesn't matter if you're being rational or you're being like unfair or whatever. If you feel the way that you feel, we need to have a conversation about it in some capacity in order for us to get back to a place where we're both feeling safe and heard. On top of that, the like making mistakes doesn't make you a terrible person thing. This is another common thing that happens a lot. People talk about it a lot in regards to childhood abuse, where like a parent will say, oh, I'm just the worst parent ever. I'm a terrible person. Just burn me at the stake for being a bad parent. This is unhelpful. I think it's important that we distance ourselves from this. And if someone is doing this to you, again, take note of that. Talk to your safe people about that, like all the things, because there is a difference between saying your behavior was hurtful and you are a bad person, right? When we feel defensive, when we have our own wounds about it, which again, very human, very normal, we can sometimes hear, hey, your behavior was hurtful, turn into you're a bad person or I don't value you in this relationship. But that's us stuff, right? Like that's our work to do. And it's important that we remind ourselves and be doing our own work around our self-esteem and all this stuff, so that when someone brings a like very credible, valid, understandable critique of you, that we're able to say, okay, hold on, like it feels real bad and I don't like it, hurts my feelings, but I can honor the value in my personhood, my worthiness as a person, and also hear that this behavior was bad. It goes a long way in helping us to validate others' experiences and like bring us closer to conflict resolution. I'm doing this a lot, but like you guys get the point that I'm making. I want to encourage people to just keep that in mind, because this is another common thing that manipulators and abusers do, where they say, oh, I'm a terrible person. And then all of a sudden you find yourself on the defensive of saying, well, no, you're not a terrible person. It's just that. And then now we're minimizing our own hurt, which is fucked up. So if you find yourself in situations or conversations like this, where at the end of them, it doesn't feel cathartic, it doesn't feel healing, and you kind of feel like what the fuck? Like, my concerns weren't heard. I don't feel validated, and that didn't feel good at all. Take note of that. Please talk to your safe people about that, because that's not fucking okay. Like, people shouldn't treat you this way. You don't deserve to be in relationship with people who are treating you like you're a bother, or like your feelings are a burden to them, because they're not. Healthy relationships that are composed of folks who have genuine care and compassion for each other, while imperfect, while the communication can be kind of rough sometimes, there is still a genuine desire to validate the other person, to care about the other person, to communicate a compassion and like love for each other, right? This obviously is not that. So yeah, I don't think anybody's surprised that I'm not amused or like validating of this fucking behavior, because this sucks. This just fucking sucks. And I wanted to talk about it, not because I think anybody needs like validation that what Colleen is doing is not okay, because I think we all know that, but just so that we can talk about it from an interpersonal, like one-on-one place. So if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We do talk about stuff like, well, we don't really. We talk about pop culture and educational stuff here, so I'd love to have you stay for that. And then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.